share my screen to show some slides. Let's see, here we go. All right, can you guys see that? Give me a nod. Yes, good. Okay. So this is the Bounce Back Better system, B cubed, which consists of 16 modules. And this is the very first one. Cynthia in Manhattan, all right. Revi in Brooklyn, I know that. Revi's my wife, by the way, just in case. So this consists of 16 modules, and we are going to be doing the very first one here, Growth Mindset from Judgments to Curiosity. And this is being done through the Professionals in Career Transition meetup that I run, which is every other week on Tuesdays at 6:30 from 6:30 to 8. And for right now, we're doing this virtually so that we can go through these resilience training modules, which are bound to help you in your career transition program or in many other areas of your life. But I'm definitely interested to hear what brought you here. If you would like to share, please type it into the chat box. What is your reason for being here? And so what we're going to do is first go over the learning objectives. So what is it we're actually getting out of this? All right, so first of all, what is fixed and growth mindset? What is the point of all this? What's the difference between a fixed and growth mindset? People, throw that term around a lot, so we're going to get clear on what it actually means. We're going to learn to recognize your own mindset and the mindsets of others and understand how mindset affects resilience, the relationship between mindset and resilience. We're also going to learn how to recognize how fixed mindset can plateau your success. By holding a fixed mindset, how it can plateau your success, as well as redirecting fixed mindsets, thoughts, and behaviors. So the thoughts and behaviors that lead to a fixed mindset and how you can redirect them. And that sort of means shifting from judging obstacles to proactively solving them, to having a more solutions-oriented approach, and to see adversities as opportunities for growth. So what is a mindset, right? We hear about this all the time. People kind of throw around this term willy-nilly. Some people they know exactly what they're talking about, and some people have their own definition for what that means. But what we're going to focus on is the definition by Dr. Carol Dweck, who's been doing research on mindset for 30 years or so. You know what? Let me put on my headphones real quick, because I think the audio will be easier to hear me. How's that? Good? Thumbs up? Okay, awesome. So Carol Dweck, she's been doing research on mindset for many years. She's now at Stanford University. And she defines mindset as a set of beliefs or a way of thinking that determines one's behavior, outlook, and mental attitude. And she wrote this book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, which is an excellent book. She also has a TED Talk. You can look that up. I actually posted a link on the Meetup page on the comment section. And I would encourage you to check that out. She's brilliant. So we're going to focus on the way that she has defined mindset. And she's been very influential in the field of psychology, which has trickled into many other fields. So the idea of mindset is that you have this thought, which determines a belief, which determines your mindset. And altogether, your mindsets collectively make up your mental schema. In other words, like the way you see the world, the way that you filter information and process it and look at the world in a certain way. So we all have a different version of that. And what is a belief? It's a thought that you've repeated to yourself often so that you've convinced yourself that it's true. And that's independent of whether it's factually true or not. It's just something that you've told yourself a million times, and now you have this belief about the way the world works, about the way that you work, the kinds of things that you tell yourself about yourself and others. It's kind of the lens through which you see the world. So you can think of this as something that's optional. And it's kind of a radical notion a lot of times, because having the option of choosing your beliefs isn't something that we necessarily think about all the time. So we're going to talk about how we can make those choices and give ourselves the freedom to make that choice. And one of the things that you can ask yourself is, are the thoughts and beliefs that you're having serving you? Are they helpful to you? I'm thinking this and I have this belief. Well, do I want to have this belief in the first place? Maybe that lens through which you see the world can use an upgrade. So resilience, which is what this whole program is about being able to bounce back despite obstacles and adversities and to keep moving. And growth mindset is the first module because it's the prerequisite for resilience. It's extremely important to begin with a growth mindset in terms of improving the skill of resilience. And yes, resilience is a skill, which we're going to continue to get into and discuss in so many different ways. And growing the growth mindset is a skill in and of itself. So we're going to break down all the different components. So what is this fixed versus growth mindset all about? So Carol Dweck, who we were just talking about, she identified these different tendencies in people through years and years of research. And one of the really interesting pieces of research that she did was, it was very elegantly designed. And so she basically studied children and gave them puzzles to do. And over time, what she realized that these children tended to group into two different tendencies, these two categories. And you could basically break it down into this. One of the groups, when offered another puzzle, once they had finished the first one, wanted a harder puzzle. They had finished one and they were like, yeah, of course, why would I do the same one, again? Give me a different puzzle, give me something harder, give me more of a challenge. And the other group tended to want to repeat the same puzzle and to say, you know what, I've already done this, I feel good about it, and next time I can do it faster. I want to have that good feeling of completing the puzzle successfully. And what she was able to extract from that and many other experiments that she's been doing over time is these two concepts called the fixed and the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is that which you believe, where talent, intelligence, and many other abilities are natural. They're inborn. You either have them or you don't. So it's this idea of talent. It's something that you're born with. It's in your nature. It's something that just comes to you. Versus a growth mindset concept, which is that these abilities are malleable. They're changeable over time. And these children in these two different groups, the growth mindset tended to have more of a curious outlook on life and look at things with this kind of curious nature, and also they had the belief that you can improve your intelligence, you can improve your skills in a particular area. It wasn't fixed, it was changeable over time. And so what we're going to try to do is explain how we can go from judging to having these fixed judgments to shifting to a more learning approach, where it's not about the label, it's about what can I get from this and how can I improve upon it. And that boils down to fixed versus the growth mindset. So for example, a statement, a belief of a growth mindset might be, I have failed, in a kind of failure scenario, right? I have failed. Versus in a fixed mindset where you say, I'm a failure. So if you notice the difference in the growth mindset, it's about the specific incidents. I have failed. Okay, so something happened, it didn't go that well, I have failed. No big deal. And James is saying free cocktails. So I'm a failure is more about your identity. It's about, I have failed, therefore what that means is I am a failure. You've internalized it to be about who you are. Right? And if you have questions about that as we go, feel free to type them into the chat box, and I'm happy to answer. So why is this even important? Why does mindset matter? Well, so as we said, fixed is about a black and white kind of binary view of the world. Things are the way they are. Intelligence is, or you're either born with it or you're not, or your level of intelligence, your ability to play music, things like that. And in the growth mindset, there's more of a shade of gray. There's more nuance. and that it allows for the possibility of incrementally growing. And in science talk, mindset is this growth mindset idea is the idea of incremental theory, where you hold this theory, this belief that progress is incremental. So if we look at that a little bit more closely, for example, with intelligence, the fixed mindset view would be that intelligence is static. So that would lead you to have this desire to look smart, right? So it's about your identity. You want to look smart, and therefore you might have a tendency to avoid challenges, for example, because if you are labeled as you are smart and you have a challenge, you want to make sure that that label sticks. You don't want to be you don't want to disprove that you're smart, right? Because what happens if suddenly that label changes? That really affects your identity. So you may be more likely to give up easily when it comes to obstacles, and to see your efforts as fruitless, because if you put in effort, it might reveal that, oh my God, they're going to find out, wait, maybe that label isn't quite true. And so you're not going to try, which means that when you see the prospect of giving it a shot, you're like, well, what's the point? It doesn't make a difference anyway. Versus if you compare it to the growth mindset, where you believe that intelligence can be developed, and we're not talking about factually whether it can and to what extent IQ or EQ or different kinds of intelligence can be developed. We're talking about the belief, right? So that may lead to a desire to learn, and therefore a tendency to embrace challenges, to persist in the face of setbacks, and to see effort as a path to mastery. So the more you try, the more you learn. And if obstacles come along, you can learn from them. So a challenge means an opportunity to improve. If you're holding a fixed mindset and criticism comes along, you can avoid it, because again, if it's an attack on who you are and your identity, it's not going to feel like it's that useful. So you're going to try to dodge it. And when others are successful, you might feel threatened, you might feel jealous, and you might not necessarily learn from the experience, but instead go, well, why are they good and I'm not, right? And these kind of very harsh judgments that you fix, that become kind of black and white beliefs. So as a result, that might lead to you plateauing early on instead of achieving more potential, right? And incrementally improving over time. And that's a very deterministic view of the world. Things are the way they are. Compare that to the growth mindset. Again, you learn from criticism and you find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. If somebody does very well, you can admire them and learn from that experience, rather than putting yourself next to them in this kind of competitive attitude where somebody wins and somebody loses in the broad scheme. And so this can actually give you a sense of free will, because if you can achieve and improve over time, then you kind of have choice, you have freedom, you have the ability to spread your wings. So fixed mindset is more about proving yourself, where growth is about improving yourself. So also, the fixed mindset is not accurate. It tends to be less accurate. So according to research by David Dunning, people are actually bad estimators of their own ability. And it's common for people with a fixed mindset to either over or underestimate their abilities. And if you think about it, we can't all be in the same place on the curve. So if everybody's kind of assuming inaccurately or saying that they're average or above average, we can't all be in that space, right? There's a much more spread out curve where we all fall along a continuum. It's not actually accurate to say that we are a particular way without a really strong sense of self-awareness. It's also physiologically not true, right? Our brains aren't static. They're not these things that are kind of implanted in our heads and stay the way they are forever. They're always changing. There's an entire field of neuroscience, this idea of neuroplasticity, which you may have heard of. And the idea is that you can even go on YouTube and find neurons that are fusing together and growing, creating links. And the idea is that neurons that fire together wire together, is kind of a brief way of looking at it. But your brain is always changing. So the idea that you have a fixed mindset, your intelligence or certain things about your brain are fixed is actually physiologically not true. And you can see that by EEG scans and experiments that look at the brain. James is saying, I would think so if competition triggers you to improve and grow and adapt. Right. So if competition triggers you to grow and adapt, then it can be useful to you because you're saying the belief that you're having is this is something that motivates me, that I want to learn from this experience. These people have particular sets of skills and that sort of thing, and it's an opportunity to grow. Ravi says, could competition play a positive role in mindset? Yeah, exactly. So it really depends on how you look at competition and what belief you hold about competition. The judging of other people saying they're good and I'm not, if it's fixed, then competition might be really frustrating and you might shy away from competition. Versus if you hold a growth mindset, you might move toward competition because you see it as an opportunity to improve yourself. Sometimes that can also be crippling, right? It could also be something that is really harmful for people who constantly need to prove themselves, and they move toward competition because they feel like there is a need to tell everybody this is how I am, and to really show that their identity is very much tied to a particular outcome, right? Does that make sense? So let's play a little game here. Activity, name that mindset. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen over here and show you a bunch of statements. And if you have a pen and paper, that would be handy. All right, let's see. I'm going to share this one. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is a little game to help us identify the difference between fixed and growth mindsets. So we won't take too long, but take a second to go through, and you can either jot it down or kind of just have a mental note of, are these F, fixed mindset beliefs, or are they G, growth mindset beliefs? So just take a second. I'll just stay quiet for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back. Just take a few more seconds. It's okay if you didn't get through all of them. Okay. So were any of these tricky? Anything that, let's see, I'm going to stop the screen share. You know what? Actually, I'll hold on to it. And let's see, where is the chat box here? Somewhere. Anyway, were any of these tricky? I will go ahead and unmute you guys. Anything stand out as particularly tricky or interesting? Any thoughts?
Yeah, this is Ganesh here. Can you hear me clearly?
Say that again, Ganesh.
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Ganesh here.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Danny, I think this line here, it's at eight or nine from the top. It says, I am not comfortable with speaking in front of large groups of people yet.
Hmm.
I found that as a um, growth mindset, and I think it can fall into the fixed mindset as well. So that one was tricky for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting point. This idea uh, of yet, right? And Carol Dweck talks a lot about that in her TED talk, right? The power of yet. If you believe that something is going to happen in the future, you just have to work toward it. You just kind of stick the word yet at the end of the statement. Oh, I'm not very good at playing the guitar yet, for example, is an indication of a growth mindset, or it's a way to help you redirect into a growth mindset. Does that make sense, Ganesh?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Cool. Anyone else? Anything else? Okay. So I'm going to switch back over to the slides, and let's see, where are we? Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's this idea that mindsets become self-fulfilling prophecies. Perhaps you've heard of the idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Basically, well, if you look it up on Wikipedia, what they say is a self-fulfilling prophecy is a prediction that directly or indirectly causes itself to become true by the very terms of the prophecy itself, due to a positive feedback loop between belief and behavior. I know that's a little like jargony, so what we'll do is look at a particular example of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's say that you have this woman here shopping at, I don't know, let's say shoes. She looks like she likes shoes. I don't know. And there's this guy selling shoes, and he shows her a bunch of things. She tries some stuff on, and in the end, she actually doesn't buy shoes, and she walks away. So what are the possibilities here? What's the difference between the guy on the left and the guy on the right? So what might the guy on the left be thinking? What might he be thinking? Let's see, where's the chat box? Trying to find all my windows here. There it is. And okay, he fails, right? Right. So the statement might be something like, I'm a failure, or I'm not a good salesperson, or something like that. I dropped my contact. Maybe he's just looking for his contact. I'm not able to sell. Right, so these kinds of label things. Okay, how about this guy, the guy on the right? What kind of thoughts might he be thinking? How can I improve my approach for next time? Exactly. So if we look at that in terms of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if we take the first guy who's saying, let's say, his belief is I'm a bad salesperson. If you start with this belief, I'm a bad salesperson, the behavior associated with that belief is give up trying to improve. And if the behavior is giving up on trying to improve in sales, your sales are probably not going to do very well. And if your sales don't do very well, it's going to reaffirm this belief, I'm a bad salesperson, and so on and so forth, and it becomes this kind of downward spiral. Versus if you take a look at the other guy, where his belief might be selling is a skill set, right? And the behavior associated with this belief of selling as a skill set is that you practice and you learn skills because they're learnable. So you practice them. And as you do that, your sales go up with time and practice, right? It makes sense. And then you believe, oh yeah, selling is a skill set because I've seen that my actions cause my results to improve. So you create your own prophecy and you see it through. So another benefit of the growth mindset is that it'll get you from good to great with less anxiety, right? So in other words, this idea of enjoying the journey, and it's not just about the destination, right? So if you're focused on the destination, you have this kind of fixed mindset idea. It causes a lot of anxiety, as opposed to the growth mindset where you're looking at the opportunity for growth and learning and obstacles as something that helps you learn. As you go through that process, you're going to enjoy it, and you're not going to experience that terrible anxiety of what if I'm a failure, or what if I'm not good, because it's not in my nature, right? So it helps you stay curious and optimistic. Any questions about that? So going from judger to learner. So as we were seeing before, that is something that we can switch, right? So how do we do that? Well, when you look at the fixed mindset, it's very focused on judgment statements. So you interpret the world and you say, there was a particular situation and it means something. You make it mean something. For example, this means I'm a loser. This means I'm a better person than they are. This means I'm a bad husband. This means my partner is selfish. They'll think I'm a terrible mother, and so on and so forth. So Marilee Adams, Dr. Marilee Adams, who wrote the book Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, talks about this idea of a judger versus a learner path. And she creates this choice map that we're going to look into. And the idea is that, well, by nature, we go into judgment mode. It's in our default nature. It's evolutionary. When we were, our ancestors learned to have this immediate judgment, or evolved to have this immediate judgment, because it kept us alive. It kept us safe. When you're able to quickly judge a situation, put a label on it, most of the time it had to do with things that were life-threatening. And what Dr. Marilee Adams is suggesting is that we can cultivate this idea of question thinking. So that judgment is default. It's normal for you to go into judgment mode. The question is, how do you get out of it once you are in it, so that you don't end up in this kind of pit of judgment? So nowadays, that's not super useful to have that judgment mode as default, because the triggers that we have aren't necessarily life-threatening. They're more ego-based. They're more like the scenarios that we've been talking about. They're these kind of identity things, as opposed to life-threatening situations. You're not getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger. It's shoe shopping. It's your boss at work. It's these things that aren't necessarily life-threatening, right? In the moment, that immediate reaction isn't going to keep you alive, for the most part, right? So Marilee Adams talks about this choice map. So essentially, you start off and you look at the initial trigger, right? So what is it that has an impact on you, a stimulus? You look at your thoughts and your feelings and your circumstances, and you can choose where your mind goes in those moments. Or alternatively, you can let your mind just do what it does and go into that default mode. So we have choice. It's not necessarily easy, but it's there, right? You can choose or you can react. It's very easy to fall into this judgment pit, especially nowadays, where you ask the questions such as, who's to blame, or what's wrong with me? These kind of fixed mindset questions. Why am I a failure? Why are they so stupid? And if you can think of any more, please feel free to share if you've ever had any of these kinds of judgmental questions. And we really all do all the time. We're our own worst critics. And that evolutionary tool used to help us, but now it's not necessarily that useful, because it keeps us in the problem. It keeps us in this mode of like, what's wrong, what's the problem with this? And it doesn't necessarily move you forward, right? It creates a kind of downward spiral, of what she calls lands you in this judger pit. And in the other direction, you have this choice. You cultivate choice, where you change the questions that you're asking yourself in a particular stimulus or triggering situation. So what happened? What's useful here? What do I want? What can I learn? How can I, as Marissa said, how can I improve my approach for next time? and what are my choices, and that sort of thing. So you're flipping the questions on their head and making them more about learning. They're thoughtful, and they're kind of win-win. They're open-ended. So what you want to do is catch yourself in those moments, right? And we're going to talk about how in a second, and that's actually much more what we get into deeper into this program with the 16 modules. But what you want to do is catch yourself in those moments, right? So you have a trigger. What do? You want to shift gears. You want to say, all right, well, I'm going down this judger path, and I'm asking myself these judgmental questions and putting labels on things, but instead, I'm going to change the questions I'm asking myself. So what are the kind of questions you can ask yourself to help switch? You can use things like, how else can I think about this? How can I ask myself an open-ended question? What do I want to learn? What do I need right now? Right? So just by prompting yourself, this is the kind of thing you can like stick on your wall, and your computer, on your desk, or whatever, so that if you can anticipate that you're going to be in a triggering situation, you can train yourself to ask yourself these questions when that does arise. So this is the choice map outlined in full. It's all over the internet too. You can totally just Google it, but her book is also great. So judgment path is problem focused, and learner path is more solutions focused. The judgment path gets you stuck, whereas the learner path keeps you moving forward. So some key takeaways. When the judgment is true, it doesn't necessarily give you anything to do about it, right? Just because you judged a scenario, it doesn't help you move forward, right? This is crap, this is wrong, they did it wrong, I did it right. These kinds of things. It doesn't help you necessarily. Once you get past that judgment, now what? Okay, now I'm still looking at the problem. So you want to redirect to ask learning questions. What is the benefit of this situation? What can I learn from it? How can I improve incrementally based on this particular situation, even if it's a failure, especially if it's a failure? So another exercise. Let's do this one. I'm going to share these. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Can you guys see that? Alrighty, so grab your pen and paper and think of a recent triggering situation, whatever that might be. We all have them. And jot that down and start to think about what were the thoughts, what were the questions that you potentially asked yourself when you had that triggering situation? If you ended up in that judger pit. And then think about how you can change them. What would be some questions that you could ask that would be more useful? Joe, thank you. Yeah, absolutely right. Numbering the lines would be helpful. Thank you. So would anybody want to share a trigger and have a growth mindset about putting yourself out there and sharing and thinking about what we could all benefit from? Come on, guys, I know you have them. Everybody has triggering situations.
Is my
Revi, yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Something that will trigger me sometimes is when I get discouraged in seeing someone perform better than I think that I can, and whatever it might be. whether it's in music or at my work. You know, when I see someone that I think, wow, that person is just like so much better at this than I am, I tend to get into like that pit of discouragement, and so I guess there has to be like a way for me to flip that thought of, oh, that person is so good at that, I'll never be that good,
Right.
into something more
So what are some of the questions that you have in your head, let's say, that when you have that kind of situation?
like, oh, how did that person get so good at that? They must spend all their time doing this. They must just, um, they must just do this nonstop or something. Or yeah, just like questioning, would I ever be able to be that good? Even if I practiced and practiced, that kind of thing.
Hmm. Okay, yeah. So, and so you can kind of see how asking those kinds of questions, which are based on, the identity of whether it's good or bad, or whether somebody is or is not good at music or work or whatever it is, could lead you down into this kind of problem-focused pit, where that's all you kind of keep repeating those statements to yourself. So then if you kind of flip it, what questions could you ask that would be more sort of learner path type questions?
Um, Learner question could be something more like, um, I don't know, where can I start, if I wanted to develop my own skills, or how, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so where can I start, right? How can I develop this further, right? And if it's a competitive thing, right? What can I learn from them? What's something that they did that I can learn from, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Um, Joe, I see you kind of hesitantly maybe raising your hand. Do you want to share? See, I'll unmute you there so you can.
So I just want to set an example, like a trigger would be like example when I recently just was starting to bike, to cycle, and there's like a good there are people who are very fast cyclists. So like a judgment or path is like, um at first, like I consider it a judgment path when I first says like I'm not really trying to be a cyclist like them. I just want
Mhm.
like so and but then the learner part, the growth mindset of me uh kept on trying to cycle, and but I don't know whether it's learner or judger part. Like I realized that I could learn as much, but it's not really that much that I need to learn, to be as fast as them.
Mhm.
They are cyclists that I'm enough to the level that I could, but the problem is,
Right.
um,
So there's a discomfort, right? So there's something that feels a little like they are good at this and I'm not so good at this. Yes, something like that.
yes.
Right. So what is the question that you could ask yourself to go from that more judgmental, they are good and I'm not, so that you could be a little bit more learning focused? What's a question you could use?
Um, the question I could use is, why do I really need to do? Why am I doing this, and why do I need to be at a certain level?
Hmm.
Um,
So in other words, kind of trying to understand why it's important to you.
yes.
Okay, yeah, that's going really deep and getting into the purpose of what drives you. Sure. Yeah, what else could you ask yourself?
Um, like how they become like that. So, um,
How did they become that way, right?
yeah.
So What process did they use to
Mhm.
improve or to get good at cycling, let's say?
And somehow like midway when I become when by experiencing it or learn doing it, you learn something that you didn't know before. You do realize that you did improve, sometimes mysteriously. So I mean that way it that's like for me that's an inflection point between
Hmm.
being up in the fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Like
Hmm.
there are certain experiences that would flip you over, or that you
Right.
would
So
notice that you you kind of change your outlook somehow, or change your mind model, something like
right. So it kind of sounds like you're saying that when you recognize that you've improved,
that. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Whether you're not exactly necessarily sure where it came from, you kind of give yourself that recognition of I have improved. It
Yes.
helps you go, oh, okay, so if I have improved, that means there's the possibility of improving. This isn't something that I either have or I don't have.
Mhm.
And it sort of shifts you into this more motivated state where you go, oh, okay, well, if I improved, then I can continue to improve. It's a possibility. It's within the realm of possibility,
Yeah. If
right?
I realize I like or I need to, I could improve.
Exactly, exactly. Very nice. Okay, so yeah, thank you for sharing that, and let's keep going. Uh, I will switch back to slides. All right, here we go. So a little bit more about redirecting, right? It's really nice to be able to say, oh yeah, I just need to catch myself in my thoughts and switch from the judger path into the learner path. That's a really nice idea, but how do we do it, right? Because it's easier said than done, especially when we're triggered, right? If your boss yells at you, or you get into an argument with you're trying to get your kid to get to school on time or whatever it is, you get triggered, right? And you're very emotional. So how do you actually switch? Instead of being like, why are they so irresponsible? Or like, why am I so stupid? Or something like that, which is the natural tendency. What do you do? Right? It's very challenging. So in order to redirect, you have to become aware of your thoughts and your feelings, right? You have to know that they're there. Because a lot of times we don't actually even recognize that this is happening. There's no space between the trigger and the response. Something happens and you react to it, right? That seems like a direct A to B connection, but it's not actually. There can be a space, and that's just that recognition. And there's a lot of tools that we have to help us develop that space. Simply, there's research actually that shows that by talking about this right now, this is actually helpful in helping you make that recognition, right? Just by presenting this research, it can be useful. So that's one tool, just learning about the science of this stuff. Another thing is mindfulness practices. And meditation is one mindfulness practice. It's not the only one. There are a lot of ways that you can be mindful. You can use mindfulness in pretty much every situation that you're in. You don't have to be like cross-legged and having your hands in this pose and in a yoga studio or whatever it is. You can be brushing your teeth. And what that does is it allows you to create space between the thoughts that you're having and the recognition of, oh, these are the thoughts that I'm having. And that gives you choice, right? So as you cultivate that self-awareness, you ask yourself the questions like, what is my mindset right now? What are my thoughts right now? What are my feelings right now? What is actually happening inside my brain and my body right this second? If you develop that awareness, it gives you the space to be compassionate to yourself. And I don't mean necessarily self-compassion in this kind of, purple colors and I don't know, mystical whatever. What I'm talking about is when you feel something or think something, you don't beat yourself up over it, because you know that if you beat yourself up over it, it doesn't allow you to learn. It doesn't allow you to progress. And what you want to do is learn and progress and get better and feel good about things, right? So it allows you to have self-compassion and say, all right, whatever's happening right now, it's okay. I'm okay with whatever's happening right now, even if it's a negative experience that you're having. You allow yourself to go, all right, it's a negative experience. I'm not going to judge myself for having a negative experience. And if you have that space and you have that self-compassion of, hey, this is okay, you can also cultivate self-care, right? So if you say it's okay, then that allows you room to go, all right, well, this is happening, it's okay, so what am I going to do about it? How do I take care of myself right now, right? So that I can improve over time. And if you take care of yourself, then you also allow yourself to have a space for more self-awareness, and it's something cyclical that perpetuates itself. And so to recap, resilience is about being able to bounce back and keep moving, right? And growth mindset is a prerequisite for resilience. And in order to do that, to cultivate that, we want to redirect onto the learner path so that it helps us keep moving forward and solutions focused. Let's see, what time is it? Okay, I think we have a little bit of time. So let's do this exercise. Okay, let's do this exercise. It's a 2-minute meditation, basically, right? And all this means is sit there, don't do anything else, and just listen to your thoughts and recognize what your brain is doing. Just kind of take note of it. Whatever your brain does, make a mental note of it. You don't actually have to write it down, but just go, all right, this is what my brain's doing. This is what it's saying to me. This is the statement that it's making. This is the feeling that it's having. Just watch it. Just practice. All right, so I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. And ready, go. Okay, let's bring it back. So, what did you guys notice? What were some of the things that popped into your head that you noticed that your brain was up to? Go ahead and type it into the chat box if you like. I can tell you that for me, as I was doing this, I was kind of like, you know what, my chair is kind of uncomfortable. I've been sitting on this kind of bouncy ball, like ergonomic chair for a while, and I sort of noticed myself going, yeah, I don't really, I'm kind of weird about that. And instead of jumping around and changing my chair and shifting, I kind of was like, all right, it's a little uncomfortable, but I'm gonna let it be a little uncomfortable and just kind of move through it and not react to it. So let's do another reflection here. And for this one, I will share my screen again. And this one is a little bit more interactive. Let's see, share screen, and there we go. All right, there it is. So I'm going to name a triggering situation. And then I'm going to ask you guys, I'll call on you if If you really don't want to participate, that's okay. You can let me know. But I'm going to call on you, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on this. So, given a particular situation, you get a call from your family member that you left the oven on when you left the house. So what are some sort of judgment thoughts that you might have? Some questions that might come to your mind that are on that judger path. And James, let's start with you, since your video is on and we know each other from way back.
So, you mean in terms of the judger path, like what you might be judged by, or what you would judge?
So this triggering situation happens.
Right.
What are the thoughts that pop into your head if you were on that kind of judgment mindset?
Well, turn it off. I mean, if the oven's on, turn it off.
So it says you get a call from your family member that you left the oven on when you left the house, right? So
Right.
there's a situation that where something went wrong, right?
Right.
Okay. So the judgment thought that you might have, what could that be?
I don't follow.
So for example, you might say to yourself, if in a triggering situation, maybe this one doesn't necessarily appeal to you, but something like, God, I'm so stupid, or like, why did I do that again? Why do I always do that?
Right.
No,
you're right. That would be a judger. That's not the way I would react. Like that.
Right. So yeah, not necessarily saying that you would. We're just kind of exploring, right? So the difference between one and the other, so that in a given situation, when these things come up, we have a space to recognize, hey, these are the kind of judgment questions that may not be useful, right? And we all have scenarios that apply to us, whatever they may be, that trigger us in that way, right? Nobody's really immune from that. So we're just sort of exploring these particular examples, right? So, if you could kind of put yourself in that mindset for a second, right? What might be some of the questions that you'd ask yourself?
Well, on the judger side, what was I thinking? What could have happened? I got to be more careful. Could have burned down the house. That kind of stuff.
Right. So it's kind of focusing on the problem, right?
Right.
So, and then if you were to switch into that kind of learner path, what sort of questions could you ask yourself to be more learner focused?
A better mental checklist before I leave the house. Make sure that I walk around, make sure lights are off and appliances are off, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So going into the solutions, right? So some things that I could have done or that I will do in the future that would help.
Or ovens are designed to be left on, so it's really not a big deal.
Right. So you're explaining it in a way that is useful to you. Right. Yeah, and having that explanatory style is something that we'll definitely get into in further modules. So let's try one more. Thanks, James. I'm going to call on Ganesh, if you're still there. Can you hear us? Unmute. I'm not sure. This is working.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Ganesh. Yeah.
Hi.
Okay, so let's try this one. The triggering event is your best friend doesn't call you on your birthday. Your best friend or your mother or somebody important to you doesn't call you on your birthday. So what might be the kind of the reaction that you might have on a judger path thought question?
Yeah, maybe on a judger path, it might be like, why I'm so unimportant for them.
Right. Why? Yeah. Why am I not important to them? Nice. What else could you potentially think?
Maybe I've not kept in touch with them, and that's why they have just ignored me.
Right. Yeah. So they've ignored me, and it's my fault in a way.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Okay. So if you were to switch that to a kind of learning situation, what kind of questions or thoughts could you switch to?
It could be that what would be the best way for them to remember my birthday? So maybe improving my friendship with them so that they remember my birthday and then wish me. Or,
So what
yeah.
can I do to improve our friendship?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. What else might be helpful in that scenario? What's a kind of solutions-oriented question that you could ask?
Solution-oriented question. I think I'm circling back to what I told you. Maybe it's like, how can I improve my friendship with them so that they call me or they remember me and they do wish me on my birthday.
Well, it also sounds like something about communicating, right? Like, what can I say to them so that they know that it's important to me, right?
Yeah.
So it's progressive. It's moving forward. Excellent.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Cool. So there's this other exercise, but I'm not sure we have too much time. But there's a few more here where you can start thinking about, what is your trigger, and then think about what is the judging response and what is the learning response. And the more you practice it, the better you get at creating that space between trigger and response or reaction. Here's some learner path questions. What do I want? What works? What are the facts and what can I learn? What are my choices? What's possible? What are they thinking? Not what are they thinking in the judgmental way, but like, what are they actually experiencing right now? What is in their head? How can I get myself into their head? What's the big picture? What's really important here, right? And that might come in whatever form for you. It's going to be different for everybody. But the triggers that you have are yours, right? Nobody else put those triggers there for you. You have them. They might push your buttons, right? Somebody might do something that aggravates you, but those are yours. And then when you take responsibility for them and you recognize that they are your triggers and you work on how to respond when somebody does push your button, because if you have that trigger, that button, somebody's going to push it at some point, right? So what are you going to do when that happens? So the more that you anticipate it and you find a way to respond in a way that helps you move forward, it'll help you not stay in that judging position. All right, so back to the slides here. Okay, so a very important, useful tool here is developing curiosity. Curiosity suffocates judgment. So what is curiosity? So in the VIA character strength assessment, which you can take online for free if you just Google VIA strengths survey, you can identify your top strengths. One of them might be curiosity. There's 24, and curiosity is an independent strength that some people have at the top. Everybody has it, just to different extents, right? So those who have more curiosity in their life, the research has shown that it's correlated with higher life satisfaction. There are I think there's 5 that are correlated with higher life satisfaction. Curiosity is one of them. Curiosity is something that we have when we're born. It is a character trait that we all possess. When you look at a baby, for example, they're curious. They're like putting things in their mouth. They're like scientists. They're exploring everywhere. They're curious about everything around them. And when we feel safe and our needs are met, it's easier to be curious. But it's also easy to lose curiosity as we get into fixed mindsets, because if you believe things are the way they are, you kind of lose curiosity about them. If something is fixed, then why be curious about it, right? So if you can cultivate curiosity, you can also help overcome those judgment feelings. Just get curious. Ask yourself curious questions. So in this book by Todd Kashdan, Curious, he defines it as recognizing, embracing, and seeking out knowledge and new experiences. So it's not just an emotion that we experience, curiosity. It's not just, oh, I'm experiencing curiosity, like it's this random thing that's happening to me. It's also something you can build, because you can develop these character strengths if you want to. And knowing that it's a tool that you can use when adversity strikes, something that can help you be resilient is going, that's interesting, asking yourself curious questions. So in one study, they asked students to keep a diary for 21 days. And people who scored high on curiosity reported higher levels of well-being. On the days when people reported more curiosity, especially those who had this high level of curiosity as a trait, they had more growth-oriented behaviors, a sense of meaning in their life, and life satisfaction. This is just a small study, but there's a lot out there. So why is curiosity useful? So if you kind of take a look at this cause and effect chart, you start with curiosity. So if you have curiosity, it results in what? In exploration. If you explore, then you discover. If you discover, that results in a sense of pleasure. You enjoy that. If you have that pleasure, then you want to repeat it, of course, because it feels good. And if you repeat it, you develop mastery. With mastery comes new skills, or the other way around. And as you have new skills and mastery, you have confidence, which leads to higher self-esteem and a sense of security. And if you have that sense of security, you're more likely to, again, feel safe and be more willing to just be curious about things. So again, self-fulfilling prophecy. So recap here, the antidote to a fixed mindset and judgments is curiosity, and growth mindset is essential for higher resilience. So what role does curiosity play in your life? I'm curious to hear from you guys. And how can you deepen your curiosity? Marissa, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can. I am here.
So how about you? Would you care to share with us, what role does curiosity play in your life?
I think it keeps me always wanting to learn something new, whether it's in work or just in general.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of a moment that kind of brings you curiosity?
That's a good question.
It's okay, take your time. What makes you curious?
I'm struggling.
I'm
trying to think of a work example, but
yeah, what's something you're curious about?
I'm typically curious about, I'm curious about a lot of things, but in like the work world, things that I maybe know on a low level, but don't know very deeply. So I guess that one example is analytics and how analytics kind of plays a role in almost everything these days.
Mm-hmm. Right. So in a case where you're looking at analytics and you're curious, you have some curiosity, you said that you don't know analytics on a deep level. What would make you a little bit more curious? How could you take that even further?
Probably either spending some time with a professional who knows about it or some sort of course to start to deepen my knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Right,
and then having even more questions about it.
Yeah. So having a list of questions that comes from a learning experience, kind of actively taking a learning approach to that curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks. And how about Cynthia? Cynthia, can you hear us? Are you there? I don't see you, but I can see your name. I'm not sure what Cynthia's. Oh, she might be sending a message. Yes, okay. Cynthia, I hope you're not driving. I'm actually typing before you called on me. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so Cynthia, tell us, what role does curiosity play in your life? Finding events to attend, book talks, seminar events after work, not work related. Can you give us a specific example? I feel like we should play the Jeopardy music. Cynthia, I can't see your wheels turning, but I'm going to assume that they are. Oh, you're at work. Ooh, that's okay. Ooh, curiosity about the connection at work. So that's that could be a useful situation, right? We are trying to attend some meetup online and the connection's bad. So a judgment thought might be something like, oh God, the stupid connection, it's always bad, right? And you kind of focus on the problem. You find somebody to blame. Oh, the IT people, they don't know what the hell they're doing. A learner situation, curiosity. I wonder what would cause something like this, and how could I learn from this experience? What could I learn from this experience, even though the connection is bad? Maybe next time I can try to do this from a different connection, or use my phone, or use my other computer, whatever it is. But it's a curiosity that comes up, like, what's there to learn about this? Even if it sucks, like, there's an opportunity there. Connect through a laptop instead of a desktop, right? Cool. Alrighty, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so going back to my slides, I think you can see them here, yeah? So I'm gonna leave you with a couple of mantras here, a couple of things to take home. So there's this Zen proverb of the second arrow, and I really like the way that Tara Brach talks about it. Here's a link to Tara Brach. You can Google her. She's a mindfulness teacher. She's excellent. She's also a psychologist, and she talks about the second arrow idea a lot. And it basically refers to this idea of the trigger. So when a trigger happens, something, a circumstance, you get triggered. You can't really control what other people do. There's some things you can't control, right? It happens. The trigger happens. It's there. Sure, you can work on it, but let's say you have this trigger. What you can control is the second arrow. It's the response to that trigger. This is like some Buddhist philosophy thing. There's this whole story around it, but essentially you have the choice that when that second arrow comes, since you're aware of the first, that you can choose how to respond to it. And Ben Zander, in The Art of Possibility, talks about the idea of asking, how fascinating? So whatever happens, you can ask the question, or you can make the statement, how fascinating, right? So the connection is bad. How fascinating. And how would that change the way that you approach things? If every time something happens, whether it's good or bad, right? And I think what we're talking about here is when things don't really go as planned or not as well as we'd like them to, you go, how fascinating. And instantly your brain goes into a different way of thinking because of the change in the question or the change in the statement that you create in your head, right? Because your thoughts become your beliefs, which becomes your mindset, which becomes your experience of the world. So to summarize, what have we learned today? Resilience. It's about being able to bounce back and keep moving forward despite obstacles. Growth mindset is a prerequisite to resilience, which is why it's the first module in this program. So staying on the learner path keeps you solutions focused and keeps you moving. Your thoughts become beliefs, your beliefs become mindsets, and your mindsets become schemas, your filters, the way that you view the world. You can change your thoughts to change your life. And developing the skills of self-awareness, being aware of your thoughts, your triggers, your feelings, and your reactions, can help you have self-compassion and self-care for ourselves in each passing moment. And so you can get on the learner path or learn to redirect from the judger path. So something that I would suggest that you guys watch is this video by David Foster Wallace, author, famous author. This is Water. It's this beautiful commencement speech that he gives, and it really addresses a lot of this so eloquently and beautifully. I think you'll really like it. So check it out. Here's a link. I also posted this link on the meetup page in the comments if you want to just go there, because this is a bunch of weird characters. In fact, you know what? I can actually just highlight it and put it in the chat box here for you. There it is. And if you're interested in some homework and some exercises to do, I hesitate to call it homework, right? Because this is just for us to, get better at this stuff. Is track your mind chatter, right? So you can do the meditation thing. You can also just set an alarm that goes off every once in a while, and whatever you're thinking in that moment, just take note of it. You can write it down, or you just go, oh, the alarm went off. What was I thinking right then and there? Was I, what kind of thoughts was I having? So just to become aware of your thoughts. You don't have to be a master of this stuff. You can just slowly begin to go, I'm going to have a growth mindset, become aware of my thoughts, and shift them whenever they're in a kind of fixed mode, shift them toward more of a growth mode. And you can keep track of this over time and see, how you develop. And track your triggers as well. So when you get triggered, get excited, right? And this is a big challenge. This is a very kind of growth mindset thing to do, because when you get triggered, when something goes wrong, it gives you an opportunity to learn, right? If somebody really pisses you off and you're able to go, how fascinating. All of a sudden, you're in this opportunity to learn. You can go, this kind of sucks, but I'm going to take advantage of this moment and learn something from it. Obviously, we don't have necessarily the wherewithal to do that, especially when we're feeling really tired and depleted and aggravated and all those things. But the more you do it, you kind of get better at it little by little, right? And I'm definitely not a master of it by any means. It's something I'm constantly working on. And if you liked this this lecture, please sign up for the next one, which is going to be in 2 weeks, and you can do it through our meetup page, which I'm going to do this again. I think most of you actually signed up through the meetup page, but if you didn't, you can go there and sign up for the next one. And also, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, you can have a free session with me. I'm a coach. You can, we can reflect on some of this stuff, or if you have any other goals or issues that you wanted to discuss, I'm happy to do that. And you can do that through my website. You can just book a session with me here, totally free of cost, of charge. And I'd be more than happy to hear from you. You can also email me, or contact me through the meetup page. I'm happy to keep this chat going. So the last thing I'll do, I think, is I'm going to play this video. And since we have technically 15 minutes left, I think it's a good way to end. And if you have to take off, that's totally cool. But if you want to stick around, I'm going to go ahead and play this video and share it with you guys, because I think it's excellent.
Hey, what's going on? It is
after this ad plays.
CEO and #1 national best-selling author.
Let's see.
And I'm here
I'm
in
gonna
the studio recording my brand
share
new
the
audio
computer
book,
sound.
Choose the single most important decision before.
All right, here we go.
There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them.
Okay, I'm gonna start it over. Here we go.
There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" The point of the fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. Stated as an English sentence, of course, this is just a banal platitude. But the fact is that in the day-to-day trenches of adult existence, banal platitudes can have a life or death importance. The plain fact is that you graduating seniors do not yet have any clue what day in, day out really means. There happen to be whole, large parts of adult American life that nobody talks about in commencement speeches. One such part involves boredom, routine, and petty frustration. The parents and older folks here will know all too well what I'm talking about. By way of example, let's say it's an average adult day, and you get up in the morning, go to your challenging white-collar college graduate job, and you work hard for 8 or 10 hours, and at the end of the day you're tired and somewhat stressed, and all you want is to go home and have a good supper and maybe unwind for an hour and then hit the sack early, because of course you have to get up the next day and do it all again. But then you remember there's no food at home. You haven't had time to shop this week because of your challenging job. And so now after work you have to get in your car and drive to the supermarket. It's the end of a work day and the traffic is apt to be very bad. So getting to the store takes way longer than it should. And when you finally get there, the supermarket is very crowded, because of course it's the time of day when all the other people with jobs also try to squeeze in some grocery shopping. But you can't just get in and quickly out. You have to wander all over the huge, overlit store's confusing aisles to find the stuff you want. And you have to maneuver your junky cart through all these other tired, hurried people with carts, etc., cutting stuff out because it's a long ceremony. And eventually, you get all your supper supplies, except now it turns out there aren't enough checkout lanes open, even though it's the end of the day rush. So the checkout line is incredibly long, which is stupid and infuriating, but you can't take your frustration out on the frantic lady working the register, who is overworked at a job whose daily tedium and meaninglessness surpasses the imagination of any of us here at a prestigious college. But anyway, you finally get to the checkout line's front, and you pay for your food, and get told to have a nice day in a voice that is the absolute voice of death. And then you have to take your creepy, flimsy plastic bags of groceries in your cart with the one crazy wheel that pulls maddeningly to the left, all the way out through the crowded, bumpy, littery parking lot, and then you have to drive all the way home through slow, heavy, SUV-intensive rush hour traffic, etc. Everyone here has done this, of course, but it hasn't yet been part of you graduates' actual life routine, day after week, after month, after year. But it will be. And many more dreary, annoying, seemingly meaningless routines besides. But that is not the point. The point is that petty, frustrating crap like this is exactly where the work of choosing is going to come in. Because the traffic jams and crowded aisles and long checkout lines give me time to think. And if I don't make a conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable every time I have to shop. Because my natural default setting is the certainty that situations like this are really all about me. About my hungriness and my fatigue and my desire to just get home. And it's going to seem for all the world like everybody else is just in my way. And who are all these people in my way? And look at how repulsive most of them are, and how stupid and cow-like and dead-eyed and non-human they seem in the checkout line. Or at how annoying and rude it is that people are talking loudly on cell phones in the middle of the line. And look at how deeply, personally unfair this is. If I choose to think this way in the store and on the freeway, fine. Lots of us do. Except thinking this way tends to be so easy and automatic that it doesn't have to be a choice. It is my natural default setting. It's the automatic way that I experience the boring, frustrating, crowded parts of adult life when I'm operating on the automatic, unconscious belief that I am the center of the world and that my immediate needs and feelings are what should determine the world's priorities. The thing is that, of course, there are totally different ways to think about these kinds of situations. In this traffic, all these vehicles stuck and idling in my way, It's not impossible that some of these people in SUVs have been in horrible auto accidents in the past and now find driving so terrifying that their therapist has all but ordered them to get a huge, heavy SUV so they can feel safe enough to drive. Or I can choose to force myself to consider the likelihood that everyone else in the supermarket's checkout line is just as bored and frustrated as I am, and that some of these people probably have much harder, more tedious or painful lives than I do. Again, please don't think I'm giving you moral advice, or that I'm saying you're supposed to think this way, or that anyone expects you to just automatically do it, because it's hard. It takes will and effort, and if you are like me, some days you won't be able to do it, or you just flat out won't want to. But most days, if you're aware enough to give yourself a choice, you can choose to look differently at this fat, dead-eyed, over-made-up lady who just screamed at her kid in the checkout line. Maybe she's not usually like this. Maybe she's been up 3 straight nights holding the hand of her husband who's dying of bone cancer. Or maybe this very lady is the low-wage clerk at the motor vehicles department who just yesterday helped your spouse resolve a horrific, infuriating red tape problem through some small act of bureaucratic kindness. Of course, none of this is likely, but it's also not impossible. It just depends what you want to consider. If you're automatically sure that you know what reality is and who and what is really important, if you want to operate on your default setting, then you, like me, probably won't consider possibilities that aren't annoying and miserable. But if you've really learned how to think, how to pay attention, then you will know you have other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer hell-type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that lit the stars. Love, fellowship, the mystical oneness of all things deep down. Not that that mystical stuff's necessarily true. The only thing that's capital T true is that you get to decide how you're going to try to see it. This, I submit, is the freedom of real education, of learning how to be well-adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. I know that this stuff probably doesn't sound fun and breezy or grandly inspirational the way a commencement speech is supposed to sound. What it is, as far as I can see, is the capital T truth with a whole lot of rhetorical niceties stripped away. You are, of course, free to think of it whatever you wish. But please don't just dismiss it as some finger-wagging Dr. Laura sermon. None of this stuff is really about morality or religion or dogma or big fancy questions of life after death. The capital T truth is about life before death. It is about the real value of a real education, which has almost nothing to do with knowledge and everything to do with simple awareness. Awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water. This is water.
All right. So, this is water. Well, thank you guys for coming, and let me know what your thoughts are, and hope to see you at future sessions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night. Thanks.